Welcome to the Leadership in Land podcast, where we talk about what actually moves the needle in the land business. This show isn't about getting rich or quick schemes or magic mail pieces. It's about leadership, systems, decision making, the stuff that you just happen to figure out after your third or fourth pricing mistake, or maybe just your first. This deal looks great on paper, guy, in a moment. Well, tune in with me today, my friends, and let's dive right in.
You're listening to the RE Tipster Podcast Network.
Okay, so quick question for you. Have you heard of our Skool community? I just want to make sure to invite you to check that out. If you're listening to this episode, it's actually kind of old, to be honest with you. And so if you want our latest, if you want our greatest content we're putting out, real conversations about leadership, decision making, building a land business that actually works in the real world, get inside our Skool community where you get access to the free leadership course, plus bonus episodes, discussions, and insights that honestly just don't make it onto the podcast. So if you're serious about this, you want to learn more about leadership, get in the community, check it out, leadershipinland.com or school.com/leadershipinland. All right, let's get in the episode. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another Leadership in Land podcast. I am your host, Dave Deniston of Generation Family Properties and the UnConference. Well, I am honored to have a special guest here with me today. You know, I like to say that I can't do everything on my own, and I am blessed with having a wonderful team. You guys heard Cameron on one or two previous episodes, and now we have and we had Eric on an episode, and maybe another one coming up here soon. I am honored to have Reggie Wright here from our team. Reggie, what's up, man?
How's it going, Dave? This is a lot of fun. I'm excited to be a part of the show today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, so glad to have you here. I really feel kind of God's hand in bringing us together. And
totally
very, very blessed in spending time with you and getting to know you. And you've kind of had a great journey that I thought it'd be interesting to tell everyone. What's your journey been? What's your role on the team? Stuff like that. So why don't you take it away and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah. So quick background, I guess. I've kind of taken a circuitous journey to GFP and connecting with you, but so I was in a previous life, I was a middle school and high school history teacher. Had always grown up, my grandfather owned a tile business, and when I was in high school, I kind of worked on like remodels and home repairs. So real estate had always kind of been something that I had wanted to explore. I was when I was teaching, obviously that's a whole world in and of itself, where there's not a whole lot of time to do anything extra like that, unless you get, like once you get a few years in, then you have some summers. But long story short, I decided to take a year off because my kids were doing school from home. And so I figured, hey, I'm going to take a year off. My wife had a part-time job, and they had been wanting her to go full-time for a long time. So we kind of switched roles for a year. And then in that course of time, I connected with a friend of my family who had done some land investing. And I'd always wanted to be involved in real estate in some form or another. He asked if I'd have interest in kind of learning the ropes of land investing and how that goes. And so jumped on board with him and had a great, obviously we went through the COVID years together and had a great time, and just learned an absolute ton. Fantastic guy. And then, as time went on, it was kind of making sense. I was going through some changes in our family. We had kind of made some plans to shift and go on this big adventure where we would travel around the country. And he was making some changes in his business and his life. He had some things going on, buying a house, doing some other things. And so as it happens, it was just at that point in time making sense for us to do two different things. And I had happened to come across a post of yours on Facebook mentioning that you were looking for someone to do acquisitions, which is what I'd been doing for the 4 years previously. And so I just, reached out and obviously I'd seen you or heard you on numerous different podcasts and is There's a lot of folks that are, as time has gone on, it feels like there's more and more people that are jumping into it, but the community is relatively small. And so, your degree of separation amongst different guys that are doing it is only a few ladders, a few rungs deep. So just kind of reached out to you. I'd known of you, and obviously you known the guy that I was working with previous. And so, kind of connected that way. And then the rest is history. It just seemed like as I got to know you more and more, I just felt more and more like, gosh, it would be really cool. I could learn so much from this guy. I love his style. I like the way that you approach things. And I've just been so appreciative of, being able to kind of find a role where I can support your team and grow our team together and just kind of be a part of GFP and just continue to learn. It's been an awesome experience.
Love that. Well, I have to imagine it's so different being in a classroom and being a history teacher versus like a small business owner. What I think is great about you is you have I think that teacher kind of comes out, where it's like, okay, everybody calm down. Everything's okay. I could very much see that coming out at you at various times. But certainly you had to deal with like leadership there, right? You're dealing with principals, teachers, sure, leading students, stuff like that, versus small business. Obviously, hey, we're leading small little groups rather than, hundreds of kids in a day. How do you look at just advice, to
Sure,
myself or other business owners, like how should we attract good employees? What do you think from your perspective that should look like to help everybody out there?
That's a great question. So how to attract good employees? Man, obviously, if there was a simple solution to that, nobody would have that problem, right? I mean, right. I think it's an ongoing process of trial and error. I think you do learn things as time goes on. One thing that I think really does separate good companies or healthy companies from organizations or businesses that struggle, though, is that I do think from a leadership perspective, if your leadership team or if your CEO or whoever is in charge of the organization, if they are leading by example, and if they are showing earnest care for their team as individuals, I think that tends to attract the people that are reflective of that character. I would say if a culture is not healthy, it's not always because the leader is the issue. Sometimes you have folks on the team that aren't great team players. I think over time, though, the employees that may not end up being the best fit for the organization will kind of weed themselves out. I think it becomes evident over time, and it kind of goes back to the book Good to Great by James Collins or Jim Collins. Having the right people in the right seats. It does take time, and I think if you, from a leadership perspective, if you are putting an emphasis on a healthy culture and you are trying to embody that in a leadership role, I think over time it does attract the right people and the right people hang on.
What do you think from an inside view, which, please just be like bluntly honest. You don't need to sugarcoat this at all.
Yeah.
What are things that you think in GFP we do well that other people could learn from? And what do you think from your perspective that maybe other people do well that we could learn from and do better in? I'd be curious to hear both of those things.
That's a really good question. So I think one thing that we do well at GFP is I do think again, I think culture is an emphasis for us because that's the case. I think we've attracted a lot of really good people, and I think we have a lot of good people in the right seats. And that's because, again, culture has been emphasized. I remember when I was going through the hiring process, trying to feel each other out to see if we'd be a good fit. It was a pretty rigorous process, and that's something that's unique, like not just to the land space. I mean, I think it's very unique to the land space, but also just in general. It was like a multi-round interview process with a heavy emphasis on company culture, core values. And so I think that's something that we do really well. And because we put an emphasis on core values, I think we have a lot of people that embody those core values. And I know that there's been a lot of thought and effort that have gone into should those core values be. And that translates into how we operate on a day-to-day basis, And so I think that's something that's a long answer to your short question. And I think that's one thing that GFP does really well. Things that we could learn from other folks, I think, there's always, especially in the land space, it feels like it's always kind of a moving target, right? The market's always changing. The processes are always changing. Leads are responding to different channels at different rates, and that changes. So I think there's always room to grow and learn. That's another thing that we do really well. In terms of what could we learn from other people, I think right now we're going through a process of trying to figure out, what's working on the marketing side, and also in terms of expanding our processes and adopting, AI or whatever, like different things that might help implement or improve our marketing. So, gosh, it's hard to identify one thing. I think processes is maybe the biggest thing. Just kind of identifying how other people are going through their due diligence. And as we think about expanding and growing into new strategies or different things, or just kind of learning how other successful investors are establishing their processes. That includes, that would be like KPIs and all kinds of things.
I feel like for us, we're like a big ship, like not quite a Titanic, but, like something really big relatively. And I feel like a lot of other investors are just more nimble because, we have a lot of terms, which is great and wonderful in that it helps to keep the lights on. But on the other hand, we have to dedicate time and energy to maintaining that and dealing with payoffs and, all of the administrative stuff that comes along with that. And so it's kind of an interesting time where I've seen some investors, they will just like burn the boats and they will be like, this is the way we used to do it. We're not doing that anymore. We are now all in on subdivides, or now we're done with that. We're all in on messy title. And they're like done with anything that had gotten them there in the first place, which is good in that I think they're all in on something and 100% of their energy is dedicated towards that. Whereas I feel like for us, we're very divided and we're constantly balancing these different streams, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just different than a lot of the peers that I feel that we have. What's your take on that? I'm curious to hear your thoughts and reaction to that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And again, I see benefits and I see drawbacks to both approaches. On the one hand, there's a little more stability when you have multiple channels that you're having to manage or keep up. That's the drawback, and it can prevent you from pursuing things quicker. But it also kind of protects you from shiny object syndrome, right? Which is a problem that we all talk about in this industry because it's so easy to fall into that trap. But it does. I think the drawback to that, or maybe the benefit for someone who for a business that is a little more nimble is that we might not be as quick to the party, and so timing up again, this is a moving target business. The market's always changing, things are always changing, and so you in an ideal world you could always come in at the top of the bell curve and time it right, but sometimes you can't. So I think again, I don't know. I guess those would be the benefits and the drawbacks to both. I see. I think just kind of depends on the situation and the size of the team and the goal of the company. And that's another thing that's really important too. Is I think at GFP we spend a lot of time talking about what our goals are and what targets we want to hit. And so it's important to have that plumb line or that common goal that we're all moving towards, so that we don't get distracted or fall into, the cycle of chasing shiny objects.
No, I love that. I think but we haven't talked a bit about your job yet and what
Sure.
you do at GFP. Let's circle back on that a little bit. So what do you do at the company, just so people know, hey, here's what I'm doing. Like, it's like, okay, there's this guy, Reggie, he's worked for the land investment. Well, what do they do?
Writing and sending purchase agreements doesn't have to take all day. With Stride CRM, you can generate a full contract with one click, send it to the seller, and track every step until it's digitally signed. No more switching between DocuSign and Google Drive and email. Stride keeps everything digital, fast, and organized in one place. Visit stridecrm.co and start watching your business improve today.
Yeah, I'm Dave's therapist, and we, goes no. So I started as acquisitions and sales. That's basically, I kind of have my hands in both the acquisition and the disposition side. So kind of managing both of those, and then now I'm in a role where trying to support the team as best as possible in a leadership role in terms of doing some sales side coaching for our intake folks, sales and acquisition coaching. Gosh, I kind of have, I'm kind of all over the place. I do most client facing stuff. So talking to property owners, talking to interested buyers on the dispo side, working with the teams, working with our internal teams that are on both of those sides. The only thing that I don't do a ton of is like transaction coordinating. Not talking to title a whole lot. Thankfully.
What I thought was so refreshing about yourself as you came into these roles, you had actually done it before, which for the first time in my land career, both you and Joe on our team had gone through other people's training. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to explain the concept of land flipping. This is awesome. Just not to have to train someone from absolute scratch, which I've done many times, but it was absolutely refreshing. That's one thing I really appreciated about you as a candidate and coming into it. It's like, okay, he gets it and he knows what's up. I think one of the things that I noticed with you is you have this desire to mentor and you like helping other people, kind of the coaching aspect. And that's why we then raised you up to be part of the leadership team, which you earned, that title. So you are on one of the 4 people on our leadership team, including me, to really know what's going on in the business and what's happening and be able to have some agency into decision making and what we're doing. So I think you've stepped into that role beautifully, which has been awesome. As we look back on leadership and kind of your role, one of the things which I wanted to spend time on in this podcast was the idea of a contest. And so I want to lay a little bit of the foundation of, okay, why did we decide to do a contest? What things did we determine? And then I'd love to hear feedback from you on how do you think it went? So I'm going to blather on here for a few minutes just to let everyone know here's what happened. So last year in 2025, we're recording this in May of 2026, we were really going balls to the wall, trying to take risk and really see what we could do as a company. So we were sending out 50 to 60,000 mailers a month from about July through the end of November was what we originally targeted. And so we had at the time yourself, Jacob. So both of you guys were acquisition and a little bit of sales at the time. And then we had Casey and we had Joe as lead managers. So there were 4 of us total at that time. And so with us putting so much money into the marketing, I mean, we're talking, $25,000, $30,000 or more a month that we were putting into marketing. What I came up with my own head was, man, wouldn't it be fun to be able to have a competition of a sort, to be able to hopefully motivate everybody with something a little bit more and to have something for us to talk about every week as we were meeting to give an update on, hey, here's where everybody's comparing who's going to win this and really, really hopefully take the team to take advantage of this time where we're spending so much money that hopefully we can get a really nice return and everybody win. And so as I went back and forth with ChatGPT and our leadership team a bit, this was before Reggie was on the leadership team, I came up with the idea of I want to do several things with the contest. One is I really wanted to reward people for their hard work. And so, but I wanted a situation too where everybody could win some money. That way, if someone didn't win, if they've worked really hard, hey, at least they get some sort of reward at the end of the rainbow kind of a thing. So how I designed this particular contest was $1,000. This was over a period of about 2 months where you were earning 1 point for every KPI that was green, which everybody had 6 KPIs. So over the time period, I guess it was 6 weeks, so 36 points possible. So the person with the most points wins, which then the tiebreaker being the lowest number of yellow or red KPIs. So it was kind of a consistency thing. How often are you in the green on your KPIs? And then the next $1,000 prize was was based on the average percentage performance across 6 KPIs over that 6-week time period. So not necessarily measuring are you green every week, but more the overall time period. How did you perform versus your goal? The idea being whoever exceeds their goals the most on average wins. So that way, hey, people are incentivized. Even if you had a bad week, well, maybe you ended up having a great period of time despite the whole thing, that maybe you had one blowout week that was absolutely awesome, even though the other weeks didn't go well. And then I said, in order to have everybody have the opportunity to be some money, for each of the 6 KPIs that were above 100% cumulatively over the contest, you earn $50 per KPI. So that's everybody could win $300. So that way, that even if you were behind and someone was blowing it out, right? Hey, you could still make some extra money on top of it. Now, on top of that, some of the other things that I put as criteria is people had to submit at least 90% of their end-of-day reports. Because in order to be eligible, right, I want them to make sure that they're doing the daily activities. I want them to be on time for at least 80% of daily stand-ups, and it had to be using open phone because we had one of our team members using Google Voice quite a bit, and we wanted her to use open phone. And so that way I was trying to make sure everyone was doing that too. And so that was basically the contest. So technically, one person could have won $2,300. And Reggie, I believe you were the winner at the top KPI performance, the second part of the contest. I'm curious to hear from you as you just reflect back on it. This was now, I think, August through the end of September or something like that, I think, last year.
Yeah,
what was your impression of presenting it? What did you think about this idea when you heard it? Were you skeptical? Were you like, oh, this sounds like a lot of fun? Mm-hmm. And then I'm curious to hear what maybe was happening behind the scenes that I didn't get to hear from staff. Like, yeah, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I think, gosh, I'm trying to think back to when you first. When we first kicked off, it just sounded like a fun idea at the time. Like, hey, this is a kind of like a change of pace, something different. I think in retrospect, looking back on it, it couldn't have come at a better time. Just because of, like you mentioned, we were. It was like the end of the third quarter. You were trying to do a strong push. We had a whole bunch of marketing going out, so everybody was busy. And I think that can very easily we have cycles in this business that get challenging, and so I think it was a fun shot in the arm to help prevent burnout. It'd be really easy if we were just kind of like putting our heads down and going through the grind. But what it allowed us to do as a team or a staff is, when we get together for our daily stand-ups or whatever, just kind of an opportunity to share some friendly trash talk or just, kind of like bond around it and just kind of joke with each other. And it was, again, it allowed us to divert the attention from kind of just the same, we're just making the same call every day, having the same conversation with, just a new set of property owners or whatever. So I think that aspect was really fun and the timing of it was great. I think if it were something that we were doing all the time, then I think it would definitely lose the impact. It's like something that that would like opportune times, like used sparingly, I guess I should say. But I thought it was great. I mean, we had a good, obviously at that time, Casey and Jacob and I, we'd message each other back and forth on Facebook and just, kind of like, again, come up with hypothetical ways that we could, quote unquote, sabotage each other just in jest, So I think it brought a lot of levity to our stand-ups too. Again, like during a time that could be just so easy to burn out when there's so much going on and everybody's trying to keep all the balls in the air and the plate spinning, and, you're having a bunch of challenging conversations along with some wins sprinkled in here and there. So I think it was a great opportunity to just connect on a different level, kind of just be human together, which is hard in this business, because everybody generally tends to work remote. It's not often that people are working in the same office together or whatever. So it just, again, provides some common ground or a connecting point for a team to kind of bond around. And I think it definitely succeeded in that way for us.
So if you're running it, then we're doing it again, let's say, what would you do different? Or was there any feedback that was negative that you heard back from any of the other staff that was like, this sucks, I don't like this, or something that they wished it would have changed different? I'd love to hear the feedback or thoughts on how can we make this better, or something that didn't go well that's like, we should tweak this if we did it again.
Yeah, well, I think one change that I would make is I would definitely change the rules so that there's no way that I would like win no matter what. Like nobody be able to beat me because of the way that I set the rules up. That's probably the first change that I would make. Otherwise, though, I don't know that we really I don't know that there was really any negativity around it. I think it was just kind of fun. One thing that I could think of like maybe a way to try to make it better or to like improve it even further. Like I thought I think it definitely accomplished the purpose and it was timed perfectly. And it was just, I don't really think that there was any negative. Like, I don't think you asked, what were some grumblings or whatever. I don't think that happened. I think everybody was kind of like, hey, this is kind of fun, it's something different. And we're just, kind of, riding it through and seeing what happens. I do wonder, like, if we were going to look at maybe doing it again, opportunities to maybe make it better, maybe injecting like a couple of different benchmarks in the middle where not necessarily that there's like a reset of numbers, but like, if somebody's fallen too far behind, maybe giving them an opportunity to like, hey, we're going to do like net. So maybe it's like a 6-week contest, but hey, we're going to do a special contest just this week, or who can make the most calls today or whatever, just kind of sprinkle those things in to give everybody a shot if they're falling behind, but I think, again, there was a team, there were 4 of us, and I think we were all fairly engaged. And I think more so than anything, the fun part of it for us was just the opportunity to rib each other a little bit, and an excuse to just tease each other. So,
do you think the financial reward was enough motivation, or do you think it was like, it'd be great to have, but it's like people weren't really driven, like, was that too little, just perfect? If we're redesigning that again?
That's a great question. I'm probably not the right person to ask, because honestly, what motivated me was just the competition aspect of it. I'm fairly competitive. And so, whether it was going to be $1,000, $100, or $10,000, I think I probably would have put in the same amount of effort just because I enjoyed, having something to tease Jacob and Casey about. So I don't know. That's a great question. But I know that I'm not everybody. I know some people are very motivated by financial reward. So, and I think also the makeup of the team that's doing it has an impact on that, right? So like a financial reward means different things to different people across the team. So, gosh, that's a great question. That's a really good question. I have to sit in that for a little bit. My gut says it maybe made less of an impact than just the competition itself, but I don't know. That's an interesting thought.
I think if I was to run it again, part of it, I think to your point, is it depends on who's on the team. Like sure. With having Joe, who was an international VA, like to me, that was like 1 month of him getting paid. So it was significant from a percentage standpoint on his income. Whereas for yourself or Casey, it was substantial, but it wasn't the same as like 1 month, if you will, that
Exactly.
it'd make a big impact financially, which I think part of that, as we think about these contests, like, okay, well, how big of a deal is it? I think you have to take into consideration, is this something that, oh gosh, it really changes the business and then you have a big financial reward for it? And I think as we're specializing more and more in subdivides and those kinds of things, as we look going forward for our company, the financial reward is that much greater. So from my perspective, I think having more reward would make sense, but we're not going to be doing that same level of marketing we did before either. So it would be interesting to redesign this based on where we are today. What does that look like? I think part of the hard thing for us right now as we're transitioning and trying different things, like we just had KPIs for some of our staff that now it's like, that isn't relevant anymore. And now we have other new KPIs. So I feel like for someone that is kind of more, hey, we know exactly what the KPIs are and you are just honed in on that, I think it's a great thing for someone doing that. If you're kind of in this transitionary phase we are, where we were doing one thing and now we're moving towards doing another, I'm not sure we know what those KPIs would be. It would have to be a different kind of a contest that I don't know what that would look like. Like, if when we do end up hiring like an acquisition manager type person for Messy Title, okay, well, it's not the same job, but how do we excite and incentivize this person and get some of that trash talking going with the rest of the group? But we have other people that their whole job is looking at subdivides and stuff like that. Well, there's not a whole lot of KPIs we can measure off of that. So definitely something we'll have to put some thought into. Anything hitting you off the top of your mind just as I'm talking about it that was like, this would be an interesting twist, or maybe this is a way we could take that concept that it sounds like from your perspective worked really great and was fun and energized the team, and I saw lots and lots of green, so I feel like mission was accomplished in terms of what I wanted to happen, which was seeing increased production and fun, from the team. Anything hitting you just as I'm talking about this that we could think about in the next 6 months or something? Because it's been almost a year since we had that other contest.
Yeah. Again, I think the timing of it, the last time we did it, the timing of it was great. So anytime that we're anticipating something coming up where there's going to be a lot of change, or it's going to feel like a grind to the team because of, we're transitioning to a new process, or we're hoping to, exceed a certain goal, or make X amount of things happen. I think as we think ahead, timing is huge. And then also, I think it's really important as much as possible to try to tie it to effort, where the team feels like, whether they do well in the contest or not do well in the contest or whatever, it's within their control. Because again, like, this business is one where, like, you don't always have control over, like, you don't have control of the market, but you have control over, how many calls you can make, or how many people how many conversations you have, the quality of those conversations, or the number of properties that you comp, or whatever, like a number of different things. But you don't always have control of the results directly. And so, I just think about, especially some of our international folks, they work hard. And so I think it'd be an awesome opportunity to reward some of that effort.
Well, it's interesting. It reminds me of, we were having our monthly team meeting earlier today, and Christy was noting, hey, this is the highest number of properties we had sold in April. It wasn't the biggest dollar volume, but in terms of number of properties, which was really exciting. And it was like, Cameron was asking her, okay, well, what was different? And she was like, you know what? I was doing the same stuff I've always been doing. Is almost like it just, the karma gods went and lined it up, and finally the karma paid off, kind of a thing, which is definitely, as you said, it is one of the frustrating things that I'm doing all this stuff I've been doing and, just not getting the results that I want. And I think that's something that is worth spending a little bit of time on, because obviously it's something you're passionate about, in that, hey, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, trying to do the stuff that I'm doing in control versus as business owners, a lot of us land investors. Certainly you have to require some amount of production, right? Because otherwise, like, why are we here? Like, we are not a nonprofit business. We are in this business to make money. And so it's this really fine and difficult line, especially for someone in your seat, acquisition, sales, where on one hand, well, there's certain things you're expected of, but on the other hand, hey, there's got to be production, and we need to pay everybody and support the company. Otherwise, why are we here, right? So
Totally.
How do you think about that from your seat, and being on the leadership team, but also someone that is required to produce?
I would probably view it different from someone in my seat versus from a leadership role, right? Like if I think about it from a leadership perspective, I'm looking at my team and I'm saying, okay, where is the effort coming from? Where is like who's doing well? Where, are we the people on our team? Do we have the most talented, highest effort people in the right seats, and are they like in terms of like where they're going to be able to produce? And maybe that means keeping them in a place that is, I don't know, like maybe that means like doing some of the harder work, like the stuff that maybe takes a little more effort or a little is a little more challenging. Maybe maybe that's the best seat for them or not. I don't know, but it's a really interesting question. I think maybe this is just me. And who I am as an individual. I just look at it like, obviously I'm never going to be perfect. Nobody is ever going to be perfect in their role. Everybody's always going to have room to grow. But at the same time, you can just do what you have control over. And so if you can be consistency and effort and pursuing growth and trying to get better in terms of skill within your role on a team, I think is all you can do. And if that ends up working out, which more often than not it will, then the team benefits, then you benefit, everybody benefits. Sometimes it doesn't always work out. Again, like this is a market dependent business and things can happen. And it's not always someone's fault. It's just the way that the dominoes fall, I guess. But I think it's so easy to get lost in that and to look at like, oh geez, what's outside of my control. And then you don't have any agency to really change the situation. So
it was balancing that line, from your perspective,
Gotcha.
Which certainly as a employee, it's like, okay, hey, I'm doing what I can do and let the chips fall where they may is kind of what I hear from you. I think, which is a fine attitude to have. On the other hand, I think there should be seasons where it's like, just like we do with the contest. Hey, I'm going to give extra. I'm not just going to do the minimum. I'm not saying that you are just doing the minimum, but in general to employees, like, are you the kind of person that's going to go above and beyond, or are you just going to do the bare minimum to skate by? And too often, I think as employers, we see a lot of people do the minimum rather than really push themselves to try and get to the next level or get through that barrier or whatever. So I don't have any right answers, but just something for everyone that's listening to think and consider, how do we do that? What does that look like? And I believe some of that comes from the values, you have as a company, as well as obviously the people that get hired and how hungry and gritty are they to be able to grind that out. So it's a combination, I think of those things. There's certain seasons, right? There's going to be seasons where people produce more, certain seasons where they produce less, and figuring that out and determining, is this person a right fit for my organization or not? Which it's so easy just to go off of numbers, which absolutely you have to look at that. You cannot close your eyes and pretend and stick your head in the sand and pretend like things aren't happening. You have to look at those numbers and KPIs and stuff like that. But on the other hand, I think there should be grace in there too for someone in a certain time frame. And you might have to renegotiate and whatnot. And sometimes that may lead to a good employee leaving just because that's just the way it is, that they can't accept the way things have changed. So I think it's such a difficult path to walk down. And certainly in this time period, a lot of us, including myself, have been in the land business. Like as employers, we want to be generous. We want to have amazing rock stars. And I would just encourage everybody out there is, of course, focus on the numbers, but also just have some means of comparison, which is why I've always liked hiring two people at the same time. So you have some sense of what is the production of this person versus that person kind of a deal, which is not always possible for people to do. But anyhow, I'll get off my soapbox. Any closing thoughts you have, Reggie, as we wrap this up?
No, I mean, I think, again, I think a lot of it just goes back to, I guess from a leadership perspective, the type of employee that you want to see. And one thing that I think you do so well, Dave, is you demonstrate that. I know that you're going through a season right now where you're making hundreds of messy title calls all the time, and you're willing to roll up your sleeves and get into it. I know it's very easy for a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners to look for a way to scale themselves out of the business. And I do think that that's, we always talk about like working on the business versus working in the business. That's important too. However, I think it really goes a long way for a team to be able to see their supervisor, their leadership team, whoever, kind of going through some of the same things that they are. So there's not a disconnect in terms of what they're experiencing versus what the expectation is. So, I think that's something that you do really well, Dave. And it kind of plays a factor in all of these things that we discussed today. What it's like to be on the phone. So what it's like to set up a contest around getting on the phone or having, how hard it is or how easy it is at times to produce or not produce. And so you have an understanding of it. So I think that's really important. Just, staying connected with the team in a leadership role, and kind of understanding each facet of what it is that they do too.
Well, Reggie, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thank you for hanging. And of course, if people have questions, they're welcome to reach out or whatever. So I'm happy to talk through and consult with you and your team. We love talking with other land investors. We love having other land investors in our leadership meetings and our monthly team meetings. Not a whole bunch of you guys, but if you want to be a part, you want to see what we're doing, the culture we're trying to set forward. We welcome you in and welcome thoughts and advice. We don't pretend to have this all figured out, but we are dedicated to learning and growing and to serve. So thank you, everybody, for listening. This is Dave Denniston and Reggie Wright of Generation Family Properties and Leadership in Land, and we'll talk to y'all later. See ya. All right, well, that wraps up today's episode. If this was helpful, don't just let it live in your head. Take one idea from today and actually put it in practice. That, my friends, is where the real progress happens. If you want to check out and keep the conversation going with other land investors like you want to make sure to check out a whole bunch of free resources and talk about challenges that we all go through. Please come and check out our Leadership in Land community on Skool. We've got bonus content, real discussions, and a free leadership course. No hype required at all. Just check out leadershipinland.com or go to Skool, that's SKOOL.com/leadershipinland. Appreciate you being here. Talk soon.